Welcome to the Aesthetic Gaming Show. Ready to dive deep into a game that's been making waves.
Making waves is putting it lightly.
I think you're right about that. This one has sparked some serious discussion and debate.
Yeah, and today we're taking a look at the First Berserker, Khazan.
Brand new action RPG.
And we're going to figure out, what it is, what it offers, is it worth your time?
Exactly, and we've got a lot to go off of.
You do.
You sent me a ton of great stuff from IGN, GameSpot,
Rock, paper, shotgun.
Rock, Paper, Shotgun, Metacritic scores, both critics and users.
Yeah, a good mix of first impressions, in-progress reviews, full reviews.
So we got a good timeline of how this game's perception has maybe evolved over time.
Exactly. And it's interesting to see how those initial reactions hold up.
And the thing that jumps out right away, across all the sources, is difficult.
It's tough, right from the get-go.
Oh, yeah.
IGN, they even say in their review in progress that it often expects near perfection, which, I can relate to. There were points where I was definitely exhausted, kind of frustrated. Even GameSpot kind of echoes that sentiment. They say it's challenging yet rewarding, that classic line.
Right.
But Rock, Paper, Shotgun, they go even further. They say it might be one of the hardest Soulslikes they've played.
And they specifically call out the boss fights, too.
Oh, the bosses, there's something else.
So this is not a game for the...
faint of heart.
Faint of heart, exactly right. You're going to have to put in the time, put in the effort.
You're going to die a lot, but it's about learning from those deaths.
And that seems to be baked into how the combat system works, right?
Absolutely. The combat is the heart of this game.
And there are a couple of reviewers that compare it to Sekiro.
Yeah, especially that emphasis on parrying.
Which in Khazan they call it brink guard, right?
Yep, brink guard. It's all about timing, precision, knowing when to deflect those attacks.
And GameSpot even says that, your defense becomes part of your offense.
Yeah, it's not just about blocking. It's about creating openings, turning the enemy's aggression against them.
It's got to be so satisfying when you pull it off, too.
Oh, it is. Rock, Paper, Shotgun, they talked about the feeling of reflecting a full-on combo perfectly.
Oh, wow.
You feel like a total badass.
So you've got that parry mechanic, but then you've also got different weapon types you can choose from, right?
3 main ones, the greatsword, spear, and dual blades, each with their own skill tree. That's according to both IGN and GameSpot.
So that offers some nice variety in how you approach the combat.
You can really tailor your playstyle.
But IGN mentioned something interesting about switching between the weapons.
Oh yeah, they said it felt less like a quick swap and more like a dramatic change.
Interesting, almost like you're committing to a whole new approach.
Exactly, like you're not just switching tools, you're switching your whole mindset.
Which could mean there's a lot of depth to each weapon style.
I think so. Each one probably has its own nuances, its own learning curve.
So let's say you've picked your weapon, you're getting the hang of the combat. How do you get stronger?
Well, there's the classic leveling system, using lacrima, which are basically like souls.
Okay, familiar territory for Souls-like fans.
Exactly. But then there's a separate system for earning skill points, specifically through combat.
So it rewards you for engaging with that core combat loop.
Exactly, but it doesn't stop there.
Oh.
GameSpot went into a lot of detail about other ways to power up.
Like what?
Upgrading stats, finding these things called phantoms that give you passive boosts.
Okay.
And there are these collectibles, vengeance points. You get them by exploring.
Okay.
And if you find and destroy hidden crystals, you can actually improve your XP game and health recovery.
Wow, that's a lot to keep track of.
Yeah, it's a pretty layered system. Seems like they really wanted to give players options.
Which could be really cool, if it's all balanced well.
Right, that's the key. Does everything feel meaningful, or are some systems just kind of tacked on?
Yeah, that's something we'll have to see as people put more time in the game.
Definitely. And speaking of exploring, that's another area where opinions seem to differ.
Right. GameSpot and Rock, Paper, Shotgun both said the game has this mission-based structure, like Nioh.
Which, on the surface, isn't a bad thing.
But then they said the levels themselves felt pretty linear.
Yeah, not a lot of that interconnectedness that you see in other Souls-like.
And they did say the environments themselves are varied, visually at least. They mentioned ruined castles, swamps, burning villages, even frozen tundras.
Yeah, aesthetically, there's a lot going on.
But if the levels are just straight paths, does that impact the exploration?
It could, that sense of discovery, that feeling of uncovering secrets, that might be.
And what about side missions? IGN mentioned those as a way to get extra rewards. Maybe take a break from the main story.
But both GameSpot and Rock, Paper, Shotgun said they felt repetitive.
Oh, no.
Yeah, like reusing environments, even reskinned bosses.
Ugh, that's not encouraging.
Not ideal. If the side content isn't engaging, it feels more like padding than anything else.
So you're not really getting that extra value, that extra depth.
Right, which is a shame because side content can be a great way to flesh out a world, add some variety.
Well, speaking of things that might not be for the faint of heart, let's talk about those boss fights.
Oh yeah, the bosses, they're the real deal in Khazan.
IGN said the early ones feel like hitting a brick wall.
You're gonna die, you're gonna have to learn their moves, their tells, everything.
And Rock, Paper, Shotgun talked about how relentless they are. Long combos, grabs with audio cues, even area of effect attacks. Sounds intense.
It is, but here's the thing. Both IGN and Rock, Paper, Shotgun, after that initial frustration, they actually came to love the boss fights.
Really?
Yeah, IGN even called them their favorite part and said once you figure them out, they're like reading a book.
So it's that classic Souls-like thing, that feeling of overcoming a seemingly impossible challenge.
Exactly, that sense of mastery, that's what keeps people coming back.
And it's interesting because IGN mentioned that the developers, Nimble, have already made some changes based on player feedback.
Oh yeah, that was in their updated review. They said easy mode got some adjustments, made it a little more forgiving.
Which is good. Gotta have options.
Right, and they tweaked the difficulty of a couple of early bosses, Viper and Maluka. They were particularly brutal.
But they also buff some other bosses, so they're not just making the game easier across the board.
No, they're clearly committed to keeping that challenge.
Which I think is a good sign. Shows they're listening to players, but also staying true to their vision.
Absolutely. And speaking of vision, let's talk about the story, the setting, all that good stuff.
So Khazan is actually part of the Dungeon and Fighter universe, which has a pretty rich history.
Yeah, it's got a dedicated fan base. It's been around for a while.
But when it comes to Khazan's standalone story, our sources weren't as enthusiastic.
No, not really. IGN called it thin and underwhelming. GameSpot said it was a fairly boilerplate tale.
And Rock, Paper, Shotgun went even further. They said it was one of the game's weakest elements. Just a very by-the-numbers revenge story.
Ouch, yeah, it sounds like the narrative isn't doing much to elevate the experience.
Even though the premise itself, betrayed general seeking revenge, there's potential there.
There is, but it sounds like the execution just didn't quite hit the mark.
So we've got this game with challenging combat, a deep progression system, linear levels, tough bosses, and a story that maybe doesn't quite live up to its potential.
So, big question, how has it been received overall?
Well, the Metacritic scores you gave me paint an interesting picture.
Yeah, what do the critics and the players think?
Critics seem to be generally favorable, scores in the high 70s, low 80s, which isn't bad.
Respectable.
But the user scores are actually even higher.
Interesting, so maybe the players are connecting with something that the critics aren't fully grasping.
Could be, and when you look at the specific strengths that reviewers highlight, it's pretty consistent.
Yeah, it all comes back to that combat system.
The boss fights, that brink guard, parry mechanic, those are the things that people are praising.
Makes sense. That's clearly where the developers focused their efforts.
And the criticism.
They all revolve around the level design being too linear, the side missions feeling repetitive, and that lackluster story.
So it seems like, for better or worse, Khazan is a game that knows what it wants to be.
It's laser focused on delivering a specific type of experience.
And who is that experience for then?
Well, based on everything we've discussed, it seems like Khazan is really aimed at players who crave a challenge.
Who want that tough, skill-based combat, who are willing to put in the time to master the mechanics.
Exactly, and who maybe aren't as bothered by a weaker narrative or a more linear world.
And, since we are the Aesthetic Gaming Show, we should mention that GameSpot did call out the cel-shaded art style.
Right, they said it gives the game a really distinct look.
And they even praised the animation. They said it has this anime-esque clarity, especially in the creatures in combat.
So there's definitely an aesthetic appeal there, even if the level design isn't super innovative.
So, to wrap it all up, the First Berserker. Khazan is a game that demands your attention, demands your skill, and offers a very specific kind of reward.
It's not going to be for everyone, but for the right player, it could be something special.
It's all about knowing what you're looking for, what you prioritize in a game.
And if brutal combat and a unique visual style are high on your list, then Khazan is definitely worth checking out.
If you're finding this deep dive into Khazan helpful, if you appreciate this level of analysis, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the Aesthetic Gaming Show.
We love bringing you these in-depth looks at the games that are shaping the industry.
So what are your thoughts? Does this sound like a game you'd be interested in?
Are you drawn to that challenging combat, that Sekiro-esque parry system?
Or are those criticisms about linearity and story deal breakers?
Let us know in the comments. We want to hear your perspective.
And for me, I'm actually really encouraged by the fact that the developers are already responding to feedback.
Shows they're invested in the game and the community.
Yeah, and while a compelling story is always a plus, sometimes that feeling of conquering a tough boss, that's its own kind of narrative, isn't it?
It is. It's a story of perseverance, of skill, of overcoming the odds.
But that linearity, that's something I need to weigh carefully. I do enjoy a good sense of exploration.
It's all about finding that balance, right? Yeah. What are you willing to compromise on? What are your non-negotiables?
Exactly. And at the end of the day, Khazan seems to be a game that knows its strengths, knows its weaknesses, and isn't afraid to embrace them.
It's a bold choice in a world where so many games try to be everything to everyone.
Agree. Disagree. Smash that comment section.
Remember,
in the world of AAA gaming, sometimes the biggest risks
aren't risks at all.
This has been Aesthetic Gaming Show.
Stay sharp.
And don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the world of aesthetic gaming.